I can't say one way or another what is the direct impact from whether it's man-made or not. I've heard arguments from both sides, but I do believe in protecting our environment. But without the job-killing regulations that are coming out of the EPA, which is what Congressman Braley supports.
Just to clarify, you do accept that climate change does exist?
I do believe that our climate is changing, but again, I'm not sure what the impact of man is upon that climate change.
I think she just said what you believe. Go ahead and...
well, look, there is a significant difference between us on these issues. Senator Ernst wants to abolish the EPA and the Clean Water Act. And I think that's a misguided decision. We know Iowa's farmers do a great job, for the most part, in trying to preserve the land that they farm, because stewardship is a big part of farming. But the reality is that Iowans want to have a strong, robust agricultural economy, and they want clean air and clean water, and they want to be able to hunt and fish and hike and bike. And if you don't accept that this is a real problem, which it sounds like Senator Ernst doesn't, many Iowa companies believe it strongly and think that if we don't do something, it will harm our economy.
And you've run a little over time, but we want to give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, thank you. I believe the dollars directed at the federal level could be spent here in Iowa, because again, Iowans know at the state level best what our natural resources are and how to best protect those natural resources. However, Congressman Braley just the other week stood with the EPA in voting against Ditch the Rule, which would have protected our Iowa farmers from EPA federal government overreach when it comes to waters on their own land. And then he tried to mislead Iowa voters by saying he would fight against this rule.
Kathy, I have to respond to that. I voted against the EPA having the power to regulate ditches and farm ponds. What I didn't vote for was throwing everything out and going back to square one, because Iowa farmers have been waiting for guidance under the Clean Water Act, and that's exactly what that bill would have done.
All right, let's move on to another reader question, and this starts with Mr. Braley. How can we eliminate or reduce the national debt without raising taxes or cutting entitlements? And if you can give that answer in 45 seconds, I will applaud. So go ahead.
Well, Kathy, it has to be a balanced approach. That's the whole focus of these deficit reduction workshops we did, where Iowans came and sat down with their neighbors and sat through the same type of decisions we have to deal with in Congress, and voted whether to cut spending in targeted areas or increase revenues. And those are the hard choices that need to be made, but it has to be a balanced approach. You know, when Iowans face financial problems, they tighten their belts, but oftentimes they'll go out and look for a part-time job to help supplement their income. What we have to do is bring that balanced approach and find those wasteful programs. We should be reviewing every federal program for potential fraud and waste and getting rid of those bad programs, and we also need to look at increasing our economy.
Okay.
Do you have any, I just want to give you the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. We do have to reduce our debt. Unfortunately, in the 8 years that Congressman Braley has been in Washington, D.C., he's voted 8 times to raise our federal debt ceiling. And our debt has doubled in the time that he has been in Washington, D.C. We need to take a good, hard look at the way our federal government is spending. And first, we need to eliminate waste. Even within the Department of Defense, we can find examples there of contracting where we can cut back to save dollars. Next, if we look at Medicare, just in 2013 alone, there was $50 billion of waste and fraud that was identified. And then maybe last, if we don't get a budget approved, we cut congressional salary.
We have tons of viewer questions. If it's okay, I'd like to move on to get to another couple here if we can before we run out of time. This one from an Iowa viewer who says, Ms. Ernst, your campaign website talks about job-killing regulations that are crushing small businesses. I believe this was a topic that you mentioned, too, earlier. Can you tell us some specific regulations that are hurting Iowa employers today?
If you look at cap and trade would be one example. Not only is it an increased tax to Iowans and businesses out there, but it would also cost Iowans an additional $1,000 in utility costs every year. This is something that was supported by Congressman Braley. Other areas would again be the EPA as it applies to the Clean Water Act and the overreach that the EPA has when it applies to farmers' lands. Now, if you look at the rule that allows the federal government to come in and regulate waters on farmers' lands, they would have, before they put in a terrace, before they planted a tree, they would have to go to the federal government and basically ask permission.
Would you like to
Mr. Braley, go ahead.
Each of the items Senator Ernst just mentioned are not law. She talked about cap and trade, and it didn't become law. And she talked about the proposed rule on clean water. It's a proposed rule. And I've been working to try to make sure that it's a balanced rule and isn't harmful to farmers and agriculture, but that has not become a rule yet.
Very briefly, would you like to respond?
And yes, I would. You mentioned rules and regulations. Well, these are things that the congressman has supported, which would kill jobs here in Iowa. And I believe we need to do what's best for Iowans and stand up against those rules and regulations. But he continues to support those.
Mr. Braley, reader asks, where do you stand today on the XL Keystone pipeline? And if your position has changed, why?
Yeah, I'm opposed to the Keystone XL pipeline, and I'll be happy to tell you why. When the pipeline was first brought before Congress and was being discussed in terms of the benefits it would provide, there were a lot of promises made. And that's why I voted for it in committee. But then when it came for a vote on the floor, I looked at what those promises looked like then, and they didn't live up to what was supposed to happen. There was no assurance that the oil was going to be sold here in the United States. And there was no guarantee that it was going to create a significant number of jobs that were going to benefit Iowa. So for me on energy policy, you need to look at, is it going to be reducing our dependence on foreign oil, promoting renewable energy, 75,000 renewable energy jobs in Iowa, and it didn't pass that test.
Ms. Ernst, you say philosophically you oppose subsidies, but you support the renewable fuel standard. This viewer wants to know, how long would you make an exception for the renewable fuel standard?
I think until we are on equal footing, and if you look at all the subsidies that are going out there to oil and many other sectors out there within the energy industry, our RFS needs to be on equal footing. So I am someone that will continue to support the RFS. I grew up on a Southwest Iowa farm, and my father is a farmer, a very proud farmer. 1 in 6 jobs are created by the Iowa farmer, and that's why I'm so proud to have the endorsement of the Iowa Farm Bureau. So again, I will continue to support the RFS and do that as your next United States Senator.
If I could respond, I'm not sure that's what Senator Ernst told the Koch brothers when she went to their secret meetings. She said that she was philosophically opposed to the renewable fuel standard, and in a perfect world it wouldn't exist. My support of the renewable fuel standard has been clear, strong, and unequivocal. In my first term in Congress, I voted to triple the RFS, and I've stood up to big oil at every opportunity because their interests are not Iowa values.
I would like to respond. Yes. Congressman Braley, you're not running against these other people. You're running against me. I am a mother, I am a soldier, and I am an independent leader. You are being funded by Tom Steyer, who is a California billionaire extreme environmentalist. So remember, please, that you are running against me, not against any of these other groups. You're running against me.
I realize that, and President Obama's name is not on the ballot. And I'm not going to owe President Obama anything on Election Day. You're going to owe the Koch brothers everything.
I owe them.
Please continue.
Thank you. I owe nobody anything except for these Iowa people. And I will stand up and do what's right for Iowans, not for California extreme environmentalists, not for Senator Harry Reid, not for President Obama, but again for the Iowa people. I am someone that has stood up for my community, my state, and my nation. I have not left my rural roots, but I think, Congressman, you have left those behind in your Beltway ways.
15 seconds to wrap up this topic.
One last response.
I have never forgotten where I came from. That's why I voted to pass a 5-year farm bill. And every major farm group in Iowa supported it. That's why the Iowa corn growers are supporting me in this election, and the National Farmers Union has given me an award. I have not forgotten my rural values.
All right, we want to thank both of you.
May I respond, please?
You can respond. I'm going to ask you one more question, though, and you can incorporate your response if you like. We'd like to turn to questions that were submitted and vetted live during our broadcast from Twitter using the hashtag #IADebate, and we do start with a question for Ms. Ernst. You have stated you are against a national minimum wage, and it should be determined by states. What should Iowa's minimum wage be?
Well, again, I do believe that is something that needs to be set by the states because our Iowa cost of living is very low. Currently, it is at $7.25 an hour, and I'm someone that worked the minimum wage way back when it was much lower. But the way that we can combat this and do better for our Iowa families is by growing our economy and making sure that we have good-paying jobs to go out to, making sure that our college graduates are finding jobs. And with the policies that have been supported by Congressman Braley, in 2013, 11% of our college graduates couldn't find employment. We need to make sure that our hardworking Iowa families can actually get up in the morning, go out to a great paying job, and provide for their families.
You may respond.
Senator Ernst has made it very clear that she is opposed to a federal minimum wage. She would not vote to raise it. She would vote to repeal it, and she would not raise the state minimum wage. That means if you're working a full-time job on minimum wage in Iowa, you're going to be making $15,000 a year. I think that's wrong. She has called the federal minimum wage ridiculous. You know what I think's ridiculous? That a family working full-time in this state is making $15,000 a year.
All right, let's continue on with one more Twitter question. We're almost out of time, and this is to Mr. Braley. Why do you and the Democratic Party think you're better qualified to make decisions for me and other Iowans, such as taking over health care?
Well, I think it's because I'm a bridge builder, not a bridge burner. I have a proven track record of working with Republicans. The very first bill I introduced created a job training act in biofuels through Iowa community colleges. I got that passed in the Farm Bill by working with a Republican from Alabama. I worked with Republicans from Minnesota to get benefits for the Iowa National Guard that were being denied them by the Pentagon. I worked with a Republican from Georgia to keep Iowa manufacturing jobs here instead of having them go overseas. And I have a proven history of working across the aisle with Republicans in the House and the Senate because that's what Iowans deserve from their next senator. Senator Ernst would have voted to shut down the federal government with Ted Cruz. She's called President Obama a dictator and thinks impeachment should be on the table.
I would like to respond to that. Congressman, you threatened to sue a neighbor over chickens that came onto your property. You're talking about bipartisanship. How do we expect as Iowans to believe that you will work across the aisle when you can't walk across your yard?
That's just not true.
10 seconds. Gotta go.
It's just not true. I never threatened to sue anyone. It's not true.
All right. We have just about 30 seconds left to go. We want to ask you a couple of really quick questions, so just a couple word answers.
All right. Mr. Braley,
yes.
If you are elected to the Senate, who is the first person you would call for advice?
Chuck Grassley.
Okay.
All right.
And Ms. Ernst?
That's Chuck Grassley.
Ms. Ernst, is this country receiving aid from the United States that you would cut off? Is there a country receiving aid from the United States that you would cut?
I would have to look at what that aid is for.
Ms. Ernst, which of the potential 2016 presidential candidates do you most identify with?
Chuck Grassley.
He's not running for president, I don't think.
I would encourage him to do it.
And Mr. Braley?
I think that the field hasn't even shaped up yet, so I don't even know how you could identify the candidate. I think one of the things that we want is a candidate to bring us together.
We have just 5 seconds left to say thank you to the candidates, thank you to Simpson College, and thanks to the people here. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you.